Yeah, we go ahead. Yeah.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was just wondering, because it's only a few of us, is it okay for you to come a little bit in front? And then we'll keep this a little bit informal. So we have Kamaini and Ashish here. So this event, my name is Keertana. I'm a volunteer with Association for India's Development, the Boston chapter. Here in Boston, we have two chapters, 8 Boston and 8 MIT. 8 Boston meets every Sunday 2 to 4. And Association for India's Development was started in Maryland about 25 years ago. And we work on various spheres. We work with grassroots partners in India. We focus on education, health, social justice, women's empowerment, but mostly with the marginalized communities. And here locally, we do fundraising, we do awareness raising, and we also invite a lot of our partners from India so we can learn firsthand from them. So in that series this year, we've brought Ashish and Kamaini, and this event is co-sponsored by twocircles.net and I always get this wrong, so I'm going to read this out. Alliance for Secular and Democratic South Asia. So I'm going to invite Kashif to talk to us a little bit about TCN or twocircles.net, which just finished 10 years last month. Yeah. Please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. And the website name is twocircles.net, twocircles.net, and it's a website which is focusing on the marginalized communities of India, Muslims, Dalits, Adivasis, and trying to bring really people who are at the margins, their voices, and making that mainstream. So, for example, today's story from Manipur, the 9 people who died last year in September by police firing, and they have refused to bury their dead as a mark of protest. So these are the stories that you don't hear, because what the mainstream media, so-called mainstream media, is doing is also like just creating fake controversy and talking about what's happening on Twitter rather than what's really happening on the ground. So we try to change that. And that reminds me of since Ashish is here, he comes from a district or located in a district called Araria. So they were, a few years ago, there was another police firing, 4 people were dead. And that story didn't get picked up. Even at the Patna level, the story was that, there was cross-firing. That's what the government officials were saying. So we sent our reporters there, and we found that actually, these people were protesting against the taking away of their land by the government and giving it to a private party. So they were, and this was their land. So anyway, so we sent our reporter there, and in fact, Ashish was also interviewed as part of that series. And by sustained reporting on that, we were able to, create an awareness about it, create some noise about that. So these are the kind of things that Two Circles is providing. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashish. So AID is a volunteer movement. We have about 1,000 volunteers across the country, and some of these volunteers actually go back to India to do this full time. And Kamaini is actually one of them, and she's one of our 8 Jeevan Sathis. And we have a few other activists like that. So both Kamaini and Ashish work in Bihar. They work with the unorganized sector, and they've initiated a trade union, and now they work on implementing the MGNREGA, which they want to talk about. It is the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, how it's implemented, how corruption should be dealt with, and if it is being executed well, and if the people are actually receiving what they're entitled to. So they're going to talk to us about that. But so Ashish and Kamaini are going to speak to us. They'll probably talk to us for about 45 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. And because it's only a few of us, we were thinking we could just introduce ourselves a little bit and tell us what background we come from, what our interests are, so then they can tailor the talk like that. So I'm Keertana, volunteer with AID, and I'm a scientist by profession.
Yeah, I'm Ashish. You will get to know more about me from this presentation.
My name is Vipin. I'm a volunteer with AID as well, and I work locally.
Hi, I'm Gugan. I'm a volunteer with AID as well. I also work in Boston.
Hi, I'm Sujata from India. Yesterday I was waiting. I gave a talk here on past and Telangana politics. I teach in a university system.
Hi, I'm Veena. I'm an artist. I just graduated from the School of Museum of Fine Arts. I go back and forth from India to here. I try to get inspired by all these different issues that aid volunteers with and use it in my life. I think.
Hello, my name is Kashyap. I work in a traffic company in the area.
Go on with it, please. So he is someone, our son.
Hi, I'm Shivangi. I'm a volunteer with A Boston as well, and I work at a local biotech.
I'm Nimish. I'm also volunteer with A Boston, and professionally I'm software engineer. Hi, I'm Siddharth. I work at MapWorks and just been introduced to the aid movement by information other people. So getting to know.
Hi, I'm Gitanjali. I just graduated. I was working as a journalist in Bombay for a few years and moved to Boston, and I'm getting introduced to Boston by information.
Hi, I'm Mudita. I volunteer with AID. I am a software engineer by profession.
Hi, I'm Santosh Rohit. I volunteer with AID and ICJ. I am an engineer by profession.
I am Faizan. I'm a third-year PhD student at the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. I'm originally from Allahabad, and I worked on 2006 and 2007. I volunteered in the NRGS service, so it's a personal interest of mine as well. It's long-standing interest. I'm a student of development studies.
Hi, I'm Praveen. Basically, I'm a software engineer, but I volunteer with Swaraj Abhiyan and I work for the farmers issue in Maharashtra.
I'm an architect in Paris, and I volunteer in Boston, and I'm specifically involved in the work that is being done to JSS and Czechoslovakia.
Nikita Patil, I work at Biden as a drug safety person, and I'm a local newspapers as well as the Chicago-based newspapers.
Hi, I'm Sandhilakar. I'm an AWOS volunteer, and I'm a professor.
I am Kamaini, and I work with the Janjagar and Chutney Sangathan in Bihar, local trade union. I'm also associated with AID for the last 39 years. And so keeping, yes, that's what I do.
Yeah, so we'll talk for about 45 minutes or maybe less. And we have split our presentation in two parts. I will start and then Kamaini will talk the later half. So yeah, thank you for inviting us. Thank you, Krishna, for hosting us. Thank you, Kasif Bhai, for being here, co-hosting the event. And thank you all for being here. I know it's summer out there and you're sitting here. That itself is a big thing. We'll be talking about organizing workers. That is what we do in Bihar. So just to give you a short context, Bihar is one of the most underdeveloped states in India, and we work in Araria, which is the northeast part of Bihar. It's a very interesting place in terms of different communities and different languages that people speak there. And in Araria district itself, there is a strong presence of minority community. Kishanganj, the neighboring district, has the highest minority population in Bihar. So we come from that context. And it is mostly rural, and 95% of people or more are engaged in rural agriculture and allied activities. So why we have named our topic organizing workers for a democratic and secular India? You must be aware of the discussions that went on in recent future in India. So there are three events which also shook us. One was, of course, killing of Dabholkar, Pansare, and Kalburgi, and they were working in different ways for a rationalist view. Dabholkar was a rationalist, Kalburgi was a literature person, and Pansare was writing about Shivaji and his vision, things like that. So their killing, then it shook many people, including writers, and then there was Dadri lynching, followed by Rohit Vemula episode, and then followed by what happened at JNU. So that has become a national debate. and where we are situated in northeast corner of Bihar, though we work in 5 districts. Why are we talking about this? We are organizing a few workers, few thousand workers in this remote part. But why this is so important for us? First of all, this is important because it is in the preamble of our constitution. That is the foundation. And we think that there is a continuous struggle to keep the spirit of democracy and secularism alive, especially in the context of recent Bihar election, where it was polarized and there was a lot of talk about things which are not developmental in nature and which completely sideline the issues of rural work. And that is why we are very concerned about it, because when that becomes the dominant political discourse, issues of marginalized community are further marginalized. So that's why we thought that we'll also talk about how within our organization we are talking about democracy, how we are building democracy, and how we are talking about peace and harmony and interfaith connections. So before going into detail, I'll talk about NREGA and stuff like that. Before going into detail, to give you a flavor of what we do here, when I was coming here, Radha Devi is there in the pictures, you can see, and she was prominently covered in one of the papers of Bihar, Hindi newspaper, and she is a leader in her community. She has organized about 200 agriculture workers in a small panchayat called Amgachi in Sikti block near Nepal border. And her struggle, her life itself, and I take the quote from the feminist movement that my life is a revolution. So when we look at her, we think that her life itself is a revolution. Not only she has been able to challenge the power structures relating to caste, class, and gender in her locality, but she has overcome even state atrocities, which is very common in rural area where state wields power through, for example, Thana and Patwar. So most dreaded or most feared people in rural India would be a Thanedar or a Patwari, related to land and related to police. So they have organized themselves, and for the last 4 or 5 years, they have been getting 100 days of work in NREGA. And if you are an NREGA observer, it almost seems impossible, because if you are on the side of the government, you are basically sharing some bounty and indulging in corruption, then you can maybe get 50 days of work. But if you're demanding as your right, as an entitlement, then it almost becomes a very uphill task, or almost impossible to get 100 days of work. And data also reflects that, because less than 1% people get 100 days of work, which has been promised. So just to tell you about what NREGA is, and you have been there, I hope you went to some functional sites also. Both. Both. So this is a very unorganized space. So this is a road being constructed in a hamlet in some panchayat near Aradia. And you can see all the people working here. They're all living near this road. So when we talk about asset generation, we talk about quality and stuff like that. It is in their interest to build this road properly. And even the demand for building this road had come from the panchayat. And so there is a democratic process involved even there. So this road was constructed because people wanted it. Some people demanded work. That's why this work was opened. And people are unionized, so they are able to get this work and are doing this work. Next slide. This is a more organized space where you can see many women. And there is a river flowing here, which is not in the picture. You can see the lush green field. And basically, they are putting earth on embankments to prevent floodings from the side. An interesting thing about NREGA and organizing is, in the spaces of organizing, it's all male dominated everywhere. So the gender issue comes everywhere, it spans. But here you can see more women, because one, NREGA provides for 33% of reservation. It is not something formal, but it is required that 33% of the workforce is women. But how it is enforced is not laid out. it is just said that 33% of workforce should be women. But to our surprise, about 50% of the workforce are women, right? So this is a big thing. Not only they have got 33, but they have surpassed and have equal say in NREGA participation. NREGA also creates assets. You can see pond here, road here, you can build many things, for example, cattle shed, or you can build even a concrete road, heat soiling, you can have a tree plantation, many things. And if I start listing, it will be 100, more than 100 list of works. Can you go to the next one? Yeah. So the Radha Devi and NREGA's work, it all binds to the organization that I and Kamini work with, the Jan Jargon Shakti Sangathan. JJSS is a non-party, but we believe it is a political process, and we are legally organized as a registered trade union. So here you see a picture which is from May Day, 1st May. All over the world, workers celebrate this as a day of remembering past struggles, or also a day of success and celebration. So we all gather typically as a Mela format, where we have a lot of nataks and all that, and also we have our general body meeting. So we all have some organizational content also here. So we started with NREGA survey, as you participated in one of them. We went to Aradia, and we found that the implementation of NREGA was very poor. We came back from villages, and we were a bunch of students, people like me. We spent a lot of time interviewing people. When we came back, we had a meeting with the civil society in Aradia, and we discussed our report. To our surprise, they said, well, you are very committed, but whatever you are telling us, we already knew it. So sorry, I mean, your content is not valuable to us. In short, that's what they said. Then we were kind of taken aback and sad that, well, we have done all this, but then it will only go in some report. And actually, a report was published in Frontline. It was the main cover of the Frontline in that year. But yeah, so we were very sad that we could not be of any use to the local community. We started discussing there itself how else we can collaborate and continue our work there. They said that there are many grievances that have come up in the survey. Why don't you start working on that? And then we asked a question to them. If you ask us to work, how about how many of you are willing to volunteer? And that's how we started. We started with a campaign to improve NREGA implementation. And since then, we have come a long way. And that's why when we give our presentation, we don't particularly stick to NREGA. NREGA is one of the tools that we use to organize people. And people like Radha Devi, they organize in their own spaces, and then not necessarily they are bound to NREGA or any one issue. The issue comes out from the community itself, and it is they who decide what course of action they will continue. We become facilitators. So over time, it doesn't happen in a day. Over time, people organize themselves, they politicize themselves. We have a lot of interaction and grievance redressal, getting NREGA work, getting pension, standing in front of police station and asserting as Dalit, as women, and all that assertion of identity. All that happens, and then a strong organization comes up in that particular area, which is able to take its own issue forward. So we have a nara, jiska mudda, uski ladai, jiski ladai, uski aguwai. Basically means people who are facing the issue should take the leadership. Unfortunately, when we come here, our leadership which is there in Aradia is not given visa. Last time also, our General Secretary Ranjit Paswan was refused visa. A very crude manner that if you cannot talk in English, what is the need to go here? That's the verbatim quote I am saying. Yeah. So, so in a sense, yeah, that kind of discrimination is also there at all levels. And now, when we say that we do politics, in the previous slide I said,
what do we mean by politics? Just to briefly go back and say what Ambedkar, Baba Sahib Ambedkar said in Constituent Assembly. He said, in politics, we'll have equality, and in social life, in social and economic life, we'll have inequality. In politics, we'll be recognizing the principle of one man, one vote, and one vote, one value. In our social and economic life, we shall, by reason of our social and economic structure, continue to deny the principle of one man, one value. And it resonates with what Rohit Vemula said when he wrote that suicide letter. And in that he mentioned, "Ek aadmi ki कीमत ek vote tak सीमित करती गई है, आदमी एक आंकड़ा बन गया." So value of a person has been reduced by vote, and an individual is just what do you call it?
Statistic.
Yeah, a statistic in the whole scheme of things. So day in, day out, the marginalized community, and we work with one of the marginalized community, you can count everywhere in India, we are facing this, that our voices are getting suppressed. We, at every step and in every institution, state institution, we are not valued as human beings. So if Radha Devi, without getting organized, goes to the police station to file an FIR, her FIR will not be registered. That is for sure, unless she has bribe proof. Right? So similarly, a number of stories we can narrate. Radha Devi, her house is burned because she is, asserting her identity, asserting her right to work in an REGS, or asserting her right to get fair ration in a village. That's why a whole lobby of vested interest and zamindar on whose land she has built her hut, or sarkari land where she has built her hut, she's getting the heat of it. So many things happen, small things on a daily basis, which you cannot suddenly come up, oh, let's now gherao the district magistrate or do this demonstration, because it is at everyday level. So abuses at a punch, at a chai dukan or a tea shop, and all those things happen on a daily basis. So what we mean by politics is kind of explained in this slide, which is changing power equations. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Important question to ask is why a man who knows how to fish is hungry when the pond is full of fish. Now, several of our volunteers who come from other places, Delhi universities and other urban areas, when they come to an area, they see lush green fields all around, and it's very beautiful in April. We have very beautiful scene, as you saw in the other picture that we were working. So, but the moment they get inside the village, from the highway or from the state road, inside the hamlet, they see a different picture. A picture where children are naked, they don't have enough to eat, emaciated men and women, and all that, which you can imagine from here. So they are also surprised that how come in this area where we see a lot of grains and everything, fields are prosperous and all that, we have this acute poverty. This is the question I think we need to ask everywhere. Wherever we work, we need to ask this everywhere. It is not that often it is said, oh, they are like that, or they are backward because they don't want to work. And yesterday only I'm coming from a workshop, and a person, aid volunteer, and he has gone through several years of volunteerism. He remarked that, okay, in my village I don't see people work, and that's why they're backward. So this dominant attitude, if you just go to a village and spend time there and see what people do and how hard they work in an REGS side, I think that will be deconstructed. So I will let Kamaini take over and talk about more about our Sangharsh and
So, well, we've come to this point where we are saying we are a political organization very consciously, but usually when we say political, we talk about vote politics. But when we talk about the JJSS, we are saying that we are a non-party political process. So we are trying to make an effort to say that vote politics is a very small part of the larger politics one has to engage with to even bring about social change. Now, Basically, what we'll try and run you through is two ways in which we are working with different issues that are coming up. One is the struggle-oriented way of working, which is, I can't take the laptop.
I can take slides.
No, but I prefer when I see the next one.
Okay.
So,
You want to take it there?
can we?
You can't take it.
So one is Sangharsh. Now it's about struggle. For example, I mean, just to ask, okay, assuming there is a problem at our local health center, and for some reason the health center is not functional. Let's say the doctor is not coming. What approaches can we take to improve that health center? Any ideas from any of you? Let's assume you are in MIT and the health center is not working. What would you do? Talk to the officials. Absolutely. So you talk to the officials. Assuming they are not responsive, where would you head then?
Occupy the hospital.
Okay. Not my thought, but brilliant thought. Occupy the hospital, maybe more pushy about it. So you can start with petitioning, and basically I'm trying to say that. So one approach is that. But assuming the response, if you got this pushy and you were out there occupying, and they said the response is that the doctor was ill today, what would you do? The doctor was ill, couldn't come on duty, we are sorry. What could we do then? We could probably look within ourselves, find a doctor, put that doctor there for the day, get somebody to volunteer on that day. Right. So all I'm trying to say is that the approach could be either way. You could get into a Sangharsh sort of situation which you work towards. So you petition the authority, you find that it's not responsive, you put pressure. But the other approach could also be you volunteer. You do some sort of a voluntary effort to see that the space works. Now, I actually am trying to make a distinction between the two. I know it's a hypothetical sort of distinction. Everything works together when you're trying to work towards a better system or change. But one aspect is Sangharsh, the other could be more constructive or Nirman oriented, as it's usually called. So first we'll go through these aspects of Sangharsh and then see if we can see where the Nirman is working alongside and where we can distinguish it. So one common question here is, isn't struggle something very difficult to do? How does it work? Kasif was almost a little smile on his face thinking, oh, we wouldn't really occupy, but just Kamaini is prompting me. I might as well say it. So, but for people we are talking about, or the organization we are part of, struggle is very common. I know Sujata is here, so she'll be speaking to at some point and intervening in this discussion. But see, the point is, it's very natural when you are a landless person, when your basic entitlements are denied to you, when your dignity is taken away from you, your day-to-day life is a struggle. So for somebody like that, to be struggling is very natural. All we are now trying to say is, how about using it as a tool to bring about change? So that is the aspect of struggle, very natural, not at all esoteric to the people we work with. But when I say struggle or Sangharsh, there are actually some real translations. So one real translation is Satyagraha, and Satyagraha is about trying to bring out the truth in a very Gandhian way, to put it. And the assumption here is that the person out there who seems like an opponent may not have the understanding. So if you were to bring about the truth in front of them, there might be an understanding that will change the situation. If the truth was to be out there up front in the face of the person who seems like an opponent, or at that position is juxtaposed as an opponent. Before we go any further, what are the kinds of issues that we deal with? To give an idea, I'm going to play a short film for you, but I'm sure there are better films you've seen, there are better articles you've read, you've gone on YouTube, you've been given documentaries, which will really explain very well as to how these problems are. In fact, AID also has a very clear way of saying interconnected problems, interconnected solutions. So it's all out there. But the beauty of this film, in my understanding, is that it's from the perspective of the people who suffer the kind of oppression and the indignity of being from the marginalized sections. So this film is made by youth, which are part of the organization that we work with the organization called Youth Ki Awaaz. It's their perception of the kind of problems they face.
समय पानी भर जाता है, जाने आने में दिक्कत होता है।
मेरा बच्चे बहुत नहीं है, कोई चीज इमरजेंसी हो जाता है हम लोग अगर बारात भी मंगाना होगा उसको जाने के पास कर देता है, चाहे अगर डिलीवरी केस हुआ उसको पूरा उठा के ले जाए, इस पार करेगा तभी हो।
पानी का जो है पानी का भी व्यवस्था ठीक हो गया, आयरन जो बहुत बढ़ता है, लीवर फंक्शन में गड़बड़ हो जाता है, अल्फाज हो जाता है, गैस्ट्रिक हो जाता है, बहुत तरह प्रॉब्लम है। कपड़े वगैरह भी गंदा होता है, कपड़े साफ धोइए उसका भी दांत भी खराब है।
या अचानक फिजिशियन या चाइल्ड स्पेशलिस्ट या सर्जन इस टाइप का कोई भी डॉक्टर यहाँ मैंने जो भी होता है ना यहाँ नहीं है, और ना यहाँ दवाई अवेलेबल मात्रा में अवेलेबल रहता है, ना और कोई चीज का देख रहता है।
कोई मरीज बचता है, कोई नहीं बचता है, डिलीवरी होते होते उसको बीमारी पकड़ लेता है।
तरह की देखी कराई करता है, उसमें पैसे वेट लगा देता है, छोड़ने के सामने 5 मिनट से करते लगा देता है, शरीर में पैसे नहीं देता है।
मेरा सारा काम मिल रहा है, जो भी काम की वो भी किताब रखा हुआ।
मजदूरी हम लोग का आइए कितना है, सब दूसरे का हम लोग का परिवार नहीं चलता।
डेली काम मिल जाता है
नहीं डेली काम, डेली काम मिले तो कोई भूखे नहीं।
यहाँ सुविधा ये नहीं है जैसे कि फैक्ट्री नहीं है यहाँ पे, में जैसे कि बिजनेस करने के लिए जो होना चाहिए, जो कि बाहर नहीं जाए आदमी, जो रोजगार उसको स्वयं मिल जाए यहाँ पे, वो नहीं है, जिस कारण से आदमी का बहुत दुखी है, जिस कारण से वो मजबूरी से बाहर जा रहा है।
तो मिलना चाहिए 500 रुपया महीना, इसको मिलता है 200 रुपया महीना, अब ये तो काम कर दिया।
4 महीना 5 महीना हो जाता है तब हम जाता है।
उस पेशेंट से आपके घर चल जाता है?
नहीं,
कुछ नहीं होगा, क्या महीना तो हमें क्या ना क्या।
जो बेरोजगार युवक पढ़ लिख के अपने गांव में बैठे हैं, कुछ नहीं कर रहे, वो पढ़ लिख के भी वही काम कर रहे हैं जो उनके माता पिता करते थे, तो हम सरकार से यही चाहते हैं कि वो पढ़े लिखे युवाओं के लिए कुछ करें।
अच्छा है कि शिक्षा से कुछ नहीं आने चाहिए, तो शिक्षा नहीं देगी तो कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते।
इसके संस्थान पर जाए, ऐसे यूनिवर्सिटी पर जाए कि बिहार में कि युवाओं को यूनिवर्सिटी में जाकर वो शिक्षा प्राप्त करे। सरकार जो भी वादे करे, मतलब झूठा वादा नहीं करे, जब वादा करे तो उस वादे को पूरा करे। अगर कर भी देते हैं कुछ वादे, तो उस वादे के लिए जांच करने के लिए कुछ भेजे ऑफिसर को भी गाँव स्तर पर एक स्कीम बनाए कि गाँव स्तर पर सच में एग्जाम होता है या नहीं।
So basically, this was also to give you an idea of the kind of issues and how people look at these issues, but to also try and say that it is not just about fixing NREGA. So sometimes because we start with NREGA, we understand it easily, we may be able to go and unionize people easily around it. Sounds as if that is the only issue, but that's not. So when we're talking about development, there are many things which are there. And all these issues are issues that this film runs through, are issues that people work with, depending on how they feel comfortable and which issues they want to raise. Then the organization and those who are involved with the organization or people like us will play a facilitator's role with the issue people want to take up. So there's not just Radha Devi and Deep Narayan ji, but there are enough and more examples. We're trying to give you a few more voices. I think Ashish talked about Swati's experience. So one of our friends who's teaching here in New York, she had come to Araria and she went to Amgachi, the slide we started with, Radha Devi's village. And she spoke to Radha Devi and said, so, you know, after hearing all those issues, she said, what can I do? And Radha Devi said, you should take our voices and our problems to people where you live. So when Ashish and I were planning all this out, we thought that we are not sure about how much of the voice we can carry, but we'll try and do both. We'll get the voices to you and we'll try and get the problem in front of you. And that is what we are trying to do in the next few slides also. So here is another voice. This is Ayub ji. Now, Mohammed Ayub was someone we met in a social audit exercise, again around the NREGA, around transparency, bringing out the records in the public domain. In 2010, he was one of the more vocal people. And then we also realized that as we started trying to build a democratic organization, for example, the JJSS has a membership base. Every member pays an amount of 50 rupees in 1 year and gets registered with the organization. Once you have a group of 100 to 200 members, they elect their own body and decide on how and what issues they want to work with. So this group that Ayub ji has built in his village has again focused on NREGA. They've been able to get 100 days of work. As Ashish says, that is only 1% of the total people who work in NREGA who are able to get that sort of work in this act. Another example, and a good one, is of Jitendra ji, who's on the cycle, and Deepnarayan ji. Jitendra is a whole timer with the Sangathan. He gives his full time to the Sangathan, and he was interested in standing for elections at the Panchayat level. Deepnarayan ji had stood 5 years ago, and he had not been able to win the vote on account of the vote. And both of them stood for elections this year. On 25th of May, we found out that they had actually won in number of votes. So now Deepnarayan is the Mukhya and Jitendra is the Sarpanch of the same Panchayat. And there's a lot of scope to be able to do something there. But we completely believe that it's about a process. The process got started when both of them, along with others in their own community, started raising issues of caste, class, its intermixing with livelihoods. And what they started then brought them to a stage where when they stood for elections, there were those few people who stood with the Sangathan support with a manifesto. Now, manifestos are not heard of in Panchayat elections. And they stood with a manifesto and they had things like, we will not take bribe, we will not give bribe, we will not ask for votes on the basis of caste or community, and things like those. And they winning this election is extremely important to us. I'm not trying to undermine that, but I'm saying that since there's a victory in the process, all those who stood for elections with a manifesto like that, to us sounds like a victory. And in that process, this winning of the vote race and becoming these representatives is only part of the larger process, and we'll have to see how it goes further. So it doesn't end here with this victory, but it just goes on. And yeah, it's a tremendous challenge. As we said, issues are not predefined. So they come from the community which is involved and engaged. The photograph on the left is of Johan, and he's an Adivasi Sati. So here, basically, there's two studies about land. His village, they're all settled on about 350 acres of land for which they don't have papers, but they have occupation. They've been tilling the land, their houses are built on this land, and now they're being told that there is a case wrangle and this land doesn't belong to you, so settle it outside the court. Another example, adjoining, you see photographs of some houses, small houses built. This is the Mason community of Araria town. Now, this land was given to them. There is a land deed. They also have physical occupation of this land. But in 2003, their houses were bulldozed, and some houses actually were broken. If you can see on top, you can actually still see some debris where the JCB machine went. And this was done by some local contractor with some political connection, not some really huge big person like a corporation or something. Some local big has been able to do this. So these are contrasting land studies. But if you observe in this case study on the right, the people come from the Mistar community, the cleaning community. Now, if you look at the caste hierarchy, they are considered the lowest in the caste hierarchy. And the Adivasis are, of course, outside the caste hierarchy, but again, are not treated with a lot of respect or dignity. So these are struggles. So how struggles mix also we should look at. So how caste and economic disenfranchisement and lack of land is completely mixed here. It's not very clear what. But I think in a nutshell, what are the issues we take up, whether it's going to be land or it's going to be a local ration shop, it's going to be an Anganwadi, it's going to be how you get work. The crux is what Pulkumari, I think, has been able to say. She's again one of our community leaders, local leaders. She says we want to participate in decision making. We want our share of the world we live in.
So it is about building participatory democracy. Once that is in place, people will come up on what issues to take up and how to deal with it. I am going to skip this and go further. But we also realize that all these struggles, so it sounds like in some ways, if I was sitting there and listening, I would say absolutely weird. We start with something really macro. We start with the Dadri lynching. We talk about Kalburgi and Pansare having been killed. We talk about these larger things that are happening, the JNU controversy, Rohit Vemula's going. And then we start talking about our work in some 50 odd panchayats or 5-6 districts in North Bihar. And we say it's all connected. Well, there are connections in the local and the global, but we do understand that there are alliances that need to be built. So the JJSS or the Jan Jagran Shakti Sangathan is part of larger alliances and campaigns. There are campaigns which are rights and entitlements based, like the campaign for the right to information, the right to food. There are also this larger understanding of the development paradigm which has to be questioned, for which, if I may say so, we are part of this larger alliance called the National Alliance of People's Movements. And here is a photograph of a beautiful convergence that came about in the December of 2014, where irrespective of which flags we held, which colors we wanted to identify with, what political ism or ideology we stood for, large number of us were on the streets of Delhi. We were in Parliament Street. There wasn't space to move also. I mean, you couldn't freely move around. And I think why was that there was a direct attack on basic entitlements. And if you look at it, two major changes were being proposed at that time. One was an amendment to the Land Acquisition Act. Now, the Land Acquisition Act has a clause in which the farmer is to be asked whether they want to give up their land or not. And an amendment was being brought to say that the farmer need not be asked. Yeah, so we can just take their land away and we would give good compensation. So that was one where we were saying no, where there was an opposition. A lot of people were saying no. And the second was that the NREGA, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, around which we've said that we've been organizing, was to be treated as a monument of the monumental failure of the past government. This is what was being said, which is basically to say that though the NREGA would be there, there was a lack of interest in funding it because it was only seen as a dole out to people. And we can talk more about it if there are questions in anybody's mind. But ultimately, all the work that we do, the guiding principle or the understanding is that there are non-negotiable principles with which we work. As I said, how we do it, where we do it, who takes up the battles, which issues, it's constructive work that appeals to us. Do I want to volunteer? Would I rather take Sangharsh path? Is left open. But there's some non-negotiables, and truth and non-violence being two such principles. But alongside or over and above that, we just try and remember what Ambedkar had said. He had said, equality may be a fiction, nonetheless, one must accept it as a governing principle. We need to reclaim this word equality, because we've become very wary of using it. When we talk about equality, we're not talking about homogeneity. We are saying we have the right to live with dignity, and therefore we need equal opportunities. And this is how we mean equality, but this is the only way we can stand by and have a conscious movement being built. Now that I have, with a lot of effort, made a clear distinction between Sangharsh and Nirman, which does not exist actually.
It's there. No, it's not open.
Talk a little about Nirman, and then we'll open up for questions. So I want to start from here. See, even when this may sound a little crude and maybe you feel you're more evolved than the discussions I'm going to initiate now, it's worth going through. So we started organizing as a trade union. As Ashish had said in the beginning, the JJSS is a trade union. So we are talking about our economic benefits. We're talking about getting work under the NREGA. We're saying our local ration shop needs to work. There is a skeleton out there. Every time I look out, I think there's somebody peeping in with a white cap, all peaceful. So So we started about all these economic issues, and then we started looking at ourselves, and we wondered if, because we were so just on the economic issue, would we be equally just when it came to issues of gender, or when it came to sensitivity about the issues of caste, or maybe different religions, or plurality of gender or sexual orientations, and we were not sure. And when we consciously started observing, the truth was but obvious, we were not. So unluckily, though we talked about economic justice, there were times at which we felt that we could be as sexist, as bigoted, or as casteist as any other person who was outside a union. And that is a scary space to be in. So we started making a conscious effort to try and change ourselves and also look within ourselves. Though we work with the system needs to change, but we need to be also aware to bring about a change. If we don't even acknowledge the problems, then we are in great trouble. So we started talking about various forms of oppression around caste, class, gender, minorities, especially religious minorities, and saying that please don't be blind to all these, but have lenses to look at the world and issues you face through these perspectives. And it was with all age groups. But to say the truth, the photographs you looked at in the previous presentation were mostly adults, and mostly in their middle ages. So they are workers, they've already got into the unorganized sector workforce, mostly migrant workers, laborers. But now the group we are also consciously trying to work with is a younger group of people. So people who are, let's say, in their teenagers or a little over that. And we started a local student internship program. Faizan said he had volunteered and in one of these surveys that happened in India. But the interesting thing is, if he remembers, and I clearly remember, if you looked around in the group of volunteers, they were usually from so-called elite colleges of India. They were from middle-class families, and I don't know if he represented or had a good representation of caste. Gender-wise, we were still doing better, but not sure on caste and other things like that. And we started thinking of why we never saw anybody from any of the local Bihar universities. I mean, forget getting people from our villages who were students, student volunteers from our village. We wouldn't even get somebody from the Bihar, that region only. So then we thought maybe we need to consciously work with our own young people. And the local student internship program that we started, this is the second batch this year, was a group of students who are from families of members of the JJS. So they are families of agriculture workers, both boys and girls, and about 21 of them were identified, and all these issues of oppression were discussed with them, and the focus was kept on freedom. And why I'm trying to keep the focus on freedom is because this board has a handwritten thing. Can anybody actually read what's written on this board in the photo? That one central word, Azadi, freedom. Okay, and no, we didn't concoct this when the JNU controversy started. This is something we were discussing like last year and during the summer internship. Why I'm emphasizing that is a lot of us talk about freedom. A lot of us in India talk about freedom. Are we talking about sedition? Do we want to be a separate country? Definitely not. The freedoms we are asking for are very basic. We are asking for freedoms from oppression, from the caste system, from gender discrimination, from atrocities, and those kind of freedoms we're talking about all the time. So if labeling became as easy as what happened in the JNU controversy, you don't know when you find people you identify with or you support labeled as something which they are not. So why I'm pointing this out is that definitely when we talked about freedom last year, or when many of us talk about freedom all the time, we are not being seditious, but labeling is something that can easily be done. So the idea of this internship program is to sow the seeds of justice and equality at a young age, but not very exciting for all of us to just come in a room and discuss about oppression and all the things that are going wrong outside in society. We want to engage with it, right? So our idea was that the youngsters we engage with, if the youngsters were ready, would they go out and in turn engage with children? Now, when you go out and you work with children, you don't necessarily take a class with them on operation, but you have a lot of fun with them. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. So the interns in turn do children's camps, just having a lot of fun with children. They do some games and things that we take for granted, some icebreaker sessions, some drawing, some storytelling exercises, and not so common, but our interns are cinema walas. Here you see a projector which does not need electricity. So this is a free screening in a village in Bihar where there is no electricity. And a lot of children are enjoying the film. The film being watched is Mulan. Have any of you seen Mulan? Ah, okay, some of us have, yes. So you can have a screening of Mulan too as part of the aid or other initiatives. It's a nice film to watch. It's an animation, but it's an exciting thing. It's not something our kids take for granted. It's something which really interests them. And yeah, it's about being imaginative and creative. Spaces that are not getting, they're not there. The other thing is engaging with reading, writing, and arithmetic. We just assume that if you're going through education, even a bad one, people would be able to read, write, and do basic arithmetics. That's the purpose of the literacy component of education. But as the ASER survey, if any of you heard about it, brought out statistics in India saying that most children in a certain grade were not able to read even stuff 2 grades below theirs, and this was not specific to the so-called Bimaru states, but all over the country. So the situation in Tamil Nadu could be similar to the situation in Bihar. Now that's extremely scary, but the consequences are that our young people are not really equipped to deal with formal education in even the 3 R's. They feel uncomfortable. And it's thanks to one of our Sathis, Nasir Bhai, that the intern team actually started working on a newspaper. So they were handwriting newspapers, which is a big deal if you are not being given basic R's in your schools. And the great part is that on this 1st May 2016, the May Day that Ashish talked about, Mazdoor Divas, we were able to bring out our newspaper, first time printed by the interns. But it's not just that, a lot of other things are also happening. So they're not always that the internship is kind of an intensive process. The youngsters come for a whole month and spend 1 month with us. But we have these day camps in which a few of us act as facilitators. We go to a village, we register some young students, and then we work with them for the day and talk about various issues. And it could be anything from health to the kind of issues they're facing in their own lives. And it's all about having a lot of fun, so that especially adolescent girls in rural Bihar are not getting a chance to do that. There have also been another interesting development, which is the women's workshop, being conscious of gender and looking at what kind of changes we need. Here are some beautiful lines by Pash, but I'm not going to translate for anybody who can read Hindi, but broad meaning is that we shall fight till we see the need to struggle, we shall struggle. These women's workshops are about a lot of things. It's about also understanding our bodies and gender issues that are facing us. And the most interesting thing about the women's workshops is that they gave birth to the men's gender workshop. The men's gender workshop was actually a discomfort with the whole idea of equality being challenged by the women's workshop. So let me just try and speak a little more on this. Was that when we started the women's workshop, there was a certain observation we made, which was that if you looked at any public event by our organization, if there were 100 participants, the chances that the women's participation would be anywhere between 50 to 80 was very high. So we were actually composing 50 to 80% of an average public meeting of the JJSS. But when it came to membership, when I had to give 50 rupees for becoming a member, the number of members who were male actually increased, and the women's membership reduced to 50%. This was because women would usually not want to spend the 50 rupees on themselves, they'll spend it on their husband or their son. Then we thought about what is happening when people are getting elected. So we looked at 3-year statistics, and we realized that the elected members in each of these units that were democratically constructed were 33%, because we had made a clause which said that 33% of elected members had to be women. And then we looked at that one person who sent to the decision-making body of the JJSS, and our percentage would have reduced to how much? What percentage would you think would be the women by then? So we say 70% open public participation, 50% when it comes to membership, reduces to 33% elected members. Now one person is to be chosen from this elected group and sent for the decision-making body. And what do you think would be the women's percentage in that group? I think you have an answer.
10%.
10%. Any other guesses? Like quick ones. 0%. Not that bad. So we were about 3 to 4%. And then it just made us realize, this is not to say anything bad about ourselves. We're conscious, and I think we're making an effort, and that is great. So, but these kinds of things started bothering us. And at the same time, there were women members who were saying, how come we don't speak in public meetings? How come Kamaini is the only person who takes the mic? How come the others are all men? And we also started realizing when the mic did go to some of our sathis, they did feel very queasy about it. They would laugh and then send the mic back. So there were all these things also happening in parallel. And we decided to sit separately and talk about what was happening. It was about understanding why this was happening to us. It was also about building our own capacities to engage with the men in the Sangathan, because we were talking about equality. It wasn't as if we had this tacit understanding that women were inferior to men. We did not. We thought we did not. And the men in the Sangathan then said, why are you sitting separately? We thought that we were all equal, so we should be doing the same thing. And that's when we asked them if they were ready to sit separately so that we could all sit together one day. And they were ready. And when we came together in the men's gender workshop, which was again facilitated by Ashish and Nasir Bhai, and I'll talk a little more about Nasir Bhai in the next slide, they came up with a set of things the men wanted to engage. The first acceptance was that yes, women are doing more work, and what are we going to be able to do is we're going to talk about a more egalitarian setup. But there were very small things they promised, as you can see in the promises that the men made, from cutting vegetables to fetching water to taking care of the elderly and children. But it was an interesting thing for us. We also realized that every time people can't come to the center, leave their day's wages and spend 5 days, 7 days or a month. So with Nasir Bhai's help, we started doing what is called Blackboard to the village. Basically, you go to the village, you sit with people and you have a discussion, but you just identify the group you want to work with, like a workshop. And you can see Nasir Bhai here in the checked shirt. He is also an interesting person. Kasif is also a friend of his, but since I have the privilege of being here, I might as well be talking about him. Nasir Bhai was a journalist and in a national daily called Hindustan. And he gave up that job, and he now is a columnist with Prabhat Khabar, another Indian national daily in Hindi. And he does a lot of this support work for groups like ours who desperately need it, but we don't know where to turn to. So Nasir Bhai's coming has been quite good for us. And as you can see on the board behind him in the discussions that we are doing, there are two things that we are saying. One is Insaan hai hum, and the other is Fark se ghृणा mat karo. And they are both focusing on the fact that there are differences between us. We are not trying to say we are all homogeneous, but we should accept those differences and not hate each other for those. So there has to be some acceptance of plurality. We are also saying that humanity is above all, and that needs to be emphasized. And of course, for all barriers, we want to break caste, gender, religious barriers. We are also saying that we need to break the class barrier, because when we make this entire presentation, everyone is thinking in their minds, okay, great work they're doing, but it's all about labor rights. So it doesn't associate with me, because I'm all there to help the underprivileged, but how does it link with me? Well, we think there are some things that link up for all of us. And in our understanding, peace and harmony is one such issue. It concerns you whether you're middle class, you're a person who's working in the fields, or you're a big zamindar who owns a lot of land. If there is no peace and harmony, we don't see how we can move forward. And that sort of also connects with why our presentation wants to talk about a democratic and secular India. Again, in the photo, there is a blackboard and something written on it. Who can read that for us? 30 January. Does 30th January ring a bell for anybody but aiders in this room? I mean, I know aid folks, it rings a bell, but other than aiders, anybody can think of what the significance of 30th January is? No, not the usual suspects. Okay. Okay. Anybody? Okay. So do any of the aiders want to take a go? No, Nimesh, I consider you an aider, right?
Yeah, basically the day on which Mahatma Gandhi was
Yeah. So 30th January 1948 was the day on which Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. And we went with this discussion. Nasir Bhai was also there, Ashish, us, a group of us, about 5-6 of us went as facilitators to a private school in our area. So this is like a middle class presence, children from middle class families are coming to this school. And even as I'm writing, you can see a lot of hands coming up, right? So there is a curiosity, there is an engagement. So we've gone there and we're talking about the day on which Gandhi was assassinated, and a lot of curiosity on the part of middle class children. And by the end of it all, the whole board is being filled. Not the end, this is like the third time we wiped and put things on the board. But there are lots of things that the children have to say. They're children from the 8th to the 10th grades. And yeah, so basically that there are some issues that are common to all of us. So this vision of a larger society, which is a healthier one, which can encompass a more beautiful world, is not something that is only for workers or for the oppressed communities or for the Dalits or for other oppressed groups. Well, so in any case, why I'm putting up this slide, if anybody is interested, we can talk about it later. But just to say that these are different things that we've been doing as part of the JJSS in our efforts in Sangat. But now we understand this is all a lot of Nirman work, a lot of constructive work, and we're trying to see if all this can be tied in with one education initiative around the Learning Center. Don't want to talk more about this. Open to questions, discussions. Maybe we can ask Jata to be the first intervention, and then we'll take, in the meanwhile, we can all think of questions, comments, et al.
Thank you very much. So, yeah. So what was a good presentation and covering all the areas of caste, gender, and religious learning center. Bihar for me is because I work on caste and gender and land. For me, all angles, it was very hardcore place, for the politics and the patriarchal and the gender. What are the challenges like? I mean, it's a challenging work for me if I go on because I worked on SEZs and I worked on mining, still working on mining. So it's a very tough job. So how do you face such kind of issues?
Yeah. These challenges are similar to what we may be facing in Bihar because of bloody land struggles in the past. As you know, there have been Naxalite movements and other movements. The land struggle has become very difficult ones to win or to lose. So it's kind of status quo. So whoever is actually on the land is on a favorable pitch. So many a times the communities who actually have just the legal paper for the land are not the occupants of the land, especially in the case of Bhutan. So if you see 21 lakh hectares of land was distributed in the Bhutan all over India, and about 8 lakh was in Bihar itself. So that problem is continuous. So that is why in villages that problem is nagging. So if a landlord has to get back to you in different ways, for example, he can deny you NREGS wages because you are also in land struggle somehow. So it becomes difficult for other services also. Anganwadi Sevika can be a seat of power in that village because typically, all these state institutions are captured by elite. The elite can be elite in the village, which if you look at just by going there, they won't seem to be very elite, but they are the elite in that community. So that's why all these struggles, because of this land has not been distributed properly, it becomes more difficult. It has repercussions on other things also. And
the threat of violence is already there. Many times we feel that really the role of police and police reforms are very urgent in Bihar especially. Police typically takes the role of an immediate threat to the community, especially Dalit minorities. So those are the challenges and we have to battle it. Any other question?
So you're saying police itself is a threat to the Dalit.
Yeah.
So I mean, as you know, police is a central part in law and order. So how do you think? I mean, police itself is a threat to the Dalit. How can we save the Dalit? What time do you think?
See, when we get into any kind of struggle within, we say don't go to the police easy. We don't go to the police. If there is a small fight, we say settle amongst yourself, because police will exploit both the parties. And because of all this constraint on resources, people are also fighting amongst each other. And it is not one homogeneous group that, okay, one Dalit group is there and so everybody is unionized. Even amongst them, there is a lot of fragmentation. So police is very corrupt, number one, very corrupt. And if you see who goes to the police, who becomes an officer. For example, there is a land reform department and there is a district collector land reform. Who becomes the district collector land reforms? The person who is supposed to do land reforms actually from some zamindar family, who is no longer a zamindar but has land in villages and he just extracts money from it. It's a typical scenario in rural areas. You have all these middle class people, they have come out of farming, they are leasing the land to subcontracting it to somebody, they just want money or grains from them and they have occupied all this. So it becomes very complicated in that sense. So if you have an issue of justice that, okay, this is my land, police will not have a sympathetic attitude towards. Most likely in this case, they were threatening people to vacate the land. In both the cases that we presented. And there are so many cases like that. So police reform is one part of it, where at least police personnel are chosen in a certain way, more representation from these communities, sensitization and all that should happen. That is one way. But of course, there is a systemic problem.
No, that is accepted. But now we have a lot of reservation. Accepted. Reservation in there, we have reservation for OBC, we have reservation for the scheduled caste, we have reservation for ST. So still, why? I mean, we don't see much people from Dalit families in the police force. Why? I mean, see, the problem is the police force. We need a law and order. If some problem happens to the Dalit, the police should take action. Police are not taking action.
See, because it's the state, right? So marginalized community do not have power in the state. So state yields its power through various state institutions. It can be a district collector at the district level. It can be district collector land reforms for land, and it can be a SP or a Thanedar at the village. So since these communities are not empowered, they are at a disadvantageous position everywhere, right from the tola they live in, because you know when they go out to relieve themselves, they are crossing a land of some landowner, and so if they get into some battles with them, as long as relations are calm, it's fine. As when they start asserting themselves for something, they'll get into confrontation, and then all these things will happen. Police will also come in. Then they will play a negative role.
So Ashish, I would add. So actually,
Yes, Jataji, before we go into further